China builds more electric cars than every other country on Earth combined. Last year, out of every 4 electric cars made anywhere in the world, about 3 of them rolled off a Chinese factory floor. Chinese factories sold over 16 million electric and plug-in hybrid cars inside China alone in 2025, which means almost half of every new car bought in the country that year had a plug. One single company, called BYD, now sells more electric cars worldwide than Tesla does. Its cars can swap a dead battery for a full one in about 3 minutes flat. Some can even bounce and hop sideways over a pothole like a 4-wheeled kangaroo. So, here's the strange part. Walk into almost any car dealership in the United States, and you will not find one single Chinese electric car for sale. Not one. It's not because the cars are bad. Plenty of people who have driven them say they are better than what's parked in most American driveways. So why are the cheapest, most advanced electric cars on the planet locked out of one of the biggest car markets in the world? The answer involves a poor orphan who became a billionaire, a government willing to spend hundreds of billions of dollars, and a fight that has almost nothing to do with how good the cars actually are. Let's start at the very beginning, from a battery shop to a car empire. In 1995, a man named Wang Chuanfu started a tiny battery shop in southern China. He grew up poor. Both of his parents died when he was young, and he was raised by his older brother and sister. He studied chemistry in college, then borrowed about $300,000 from a relative and opened a small factory with only 20 workers. He called the company BYD, which stands for Build Your Dream. That battery shop grew fast. Within a few years, BYD became one of the biggest makers of rechargeable batteries in all of China. Then, in 2003, Wang did something that sounded completely crazy. He spent around $30 million to buy a struggling, mostly broken car company. He had never built a car in his life. But he had a plan. If his company could build some of the best batteries in the world, he believed they could build the cars to go with them, too. There was just one tiny problem. BYD had no idea how to actually build a car. So at first, they did what a lot of new companies do. They took apart second-hand Toyotas, Hondas, and Volkswagens piece by piece, just to learn how everything worked. Their early cars were honestly not very good. Some critics laughed at them. But here's the thing about learning to cook by copying recipes first. Eventually, you start changing the recipe yourself. Each new model got a little better, a little faster, a little smarter, until copying turned into actual invention. Then, in 2014, something happened that changed everything for the whole Chinese car industry. Elon Musk made a surprising announcement. Tesla would open up all of its electric car patents for free. Any company could use Tesla's ideas without getting sued. It was meant to help speed up the whole world's switch to electric cars. But Chinese companies jumped on the opportunity. New electric car startups with names like NIO, XPeng, and Li Auto studied Tesla's designs closely, borrowed what worked, and then started building their own versions, faster than almost anyone expected. Copying got them in the door, but it's not what made them dangerous. What made the difference was what BYD did next. While most car companies in the West buy their parts from hundreds of outside suppliers, BYD decided to build almost everything itself. Its own batteries, its own computer chips, its own electric motors. Today, the company even builds its own ships to carry cars overseas. That might sound like a strange business move, but it gives BYD a massive edge. When you make everything in-house, you cut out the middlemen, you control your own costs, and you can move incredibly fast. How fast? Most traditional car companies in America, Germany, or Japan take 3 to 4 years to design a brand new car model and get it into showrooms. BYD can do it in about 18 to 24 months. That's nearly half the time. By 2024, that speed had paid off in a huge way. BYD sold more than 4 million vehicles and pulled in over $100 billion in revenue, officially passing Tesla. By 2025, BYD had also outsold Tesla in fully electric cars for the very first time. moving over 2.25 million of them compared to Tesla's 1.6 million. This is a wild turnaround if you remember how Elon Musk used to talk about BYD. Back in 2011, when asked about BYD as a competitor, he laughed, literally laughed, on camera. He said he didn't think they had a good product. A decade later, he was singing a very different tune, even admitting that Chinese car companies were so strong that without trade barriers, they could crush almost every other car company on the planet. By 2025, BYD's full-year revenue had climbed past $116 billion, while Tesla's revenue actually slipped to under $95 billion. The company Musk once laughed off had not just caught up, it had pulled ahead. That word, trade barriers, is going to matter a lot later in this story. But first, before we get into the brutal price war that's already wiped out hundreds of Chinese car companies, hit that subscribe button. Because this story gets a lot crazier from here, and you'll want to see exactly how an entire industry nearly ate itself alive trying to win. The price war that ate itself. Here's something that might surprise you. Even with all of BYD's success, even with global EV sales hitting a record 20.7 million cars worldwide in 2025, building cars in China has become one of the toughest, most brutal businesses on the planet right now. At one point, there were more than 200 different electric car brands competing in China at the same time. Picture 200 companies all fighting over the same customers, all slashing prices to try to win. That's not really competition anymore. That's chaos, and the chaos has been deadly for a lot of these companies. Since 2018, more than 400 Chinese EV companies have shut down. By the middle of 2025, only around 100 were still actually operating. Some experts predict that by 2030, fewer than 50 will still be standing, and maybe only 15 to 20 of those will actually be making money. One startup raised close to $1.5 billion, promising a futuristic, Tesla-beating car, hired thousands of workers, built flashy showrooms, and then never managed to actually sell a single finished car to a real customer. Employees went months without paychecks before the whole thing collapsed. One company called Hozon, which made a brand called Neta, went bankrupt in 2025 and just stopped operating, leaving customers without anywhere to even get their cars fixed. Another company called NIO lost about $1.6 billion in just the first half of 2025 alone. So why is this happening? It comes down to price. Chinese automakers have figured out how to make EVs shockingly cheap. In the United States, Tesla's least expensive car still costs around $35,000. In China, you can buy a small electric car called the BYD Seagull for under $10,000. It still gets up to 250 miles of range and comes with fast charging. There's an even cheaper one, made by a partnership between General Motors and a Chinese company, that starts at around $5,000. That car became one of the best-selling vehicles in the entire country. How is this even possible? A big part of it is labor. A car factory worker in China might earn around $3 an hour. That's roughly a tenth of what a unionized auto worker earns in the United States. Building cars still takes a huge amount of human labor, not just robots. People are needed for assembly, quality checks, and shipping. BYD alone employs over 900,000 people. A company in the West simply could not afford that many workers on the payroll, and cheap does not mean boring. To stand out in such a packed market, Chinese automakers started throwing in features nobody else even tries. Some cars come with giant rotating touchscreens you can spin sideways to watch videos while charging. Others have built-in karaoke microphones and speakers, or massage seats in cars that cost less than a used sedan in America. One company, NIO, built an entire network of battery swap stations across China. Instead of waiting half an hour to charge, you pull in, and a machine swaps your dead battery for a fully charged one in about 3 minutes. NIO says drivers have used this more than 30 million times. Tesla actually tried something similar years ago in California and gave up because barely anyone used it. In China, it became a selling point. But cheap labor created a side effect nobody really wanted. Automakers started competing so hard on price that they began cutting corners just to survive. Suppliers told reporters that car companies were demanding price cuts of 10% or more every single year, and if a supplier refused, there were 10 other companies ready to take their place. One supplier said they were forced to drop prices by more than 40% just to keep their contract. The overall quality of parts started slipping. Companies were stuck in a race where everyone was working harder and harder, but nobody was actually getting ahead. In China, there's even a word for this kind of self-destructive competition. It's called involution. By 2025, the Chinese government decided enough was enough. Officials launched what they call an anti-involution campaign, basically ordering car companies to stop the reckless price cutting before it destroyed the whole industry. 17 major automakers, including BYD, agreed to start paying their suppliers within 60 days instead of dragging it out. New rules in 2026 set price floors so companies could not keep selling cars for less than it cost to build them. Even BYD, the company on top of the mountain, felt the pain. Its profit actually dropped 19% in 2025, even though its sales were setting records. So here's a question worth sitting with for a second. If Chinese car companies are tearing each other apart just to survive at home, how are they managing to expand so aggressively around the rest of the world? To understand that, we need to look at something a lot bigger than any single car company. We need to look at the government standing behind all of them. China's secret weapon isn't a car. It's a government building cheap, fast, well-made electric cars is impressive on its own. But it's not the whole story. Behind almost every Chinese EV success story, there's been a government quietly pulling strings and pouring in an enormous amount of money to make sure these companies win. Since 2009, the Chinese government has spent more than $200 billion pushing electric vehicles forward. To put that in perspective, that's more money than the entire yearly economy of many countries. Some of that spending got a little out of control. A handful of companies built cheap, low-range cars purely to qualify for government subsidies with no real plan to actually sell them. Some of those cars ended up dumped in giant empty lots, sometimes called EV graveyards, never driven a single mile. In one extreme case, a company collected over $900 million in subsidies without ever producing a single real car that worked. But the government did more than just hand out cash. It also bailed companies out directly. In 2020, the city of Hefei invested nearly $1 billion into a struggling EV maker called NIO, taking a large ownership stake just to save it from going under. In Shenzhen, local officials simply ordered the entire city bus fleet to switch over to electric buses made by BYD. Then there's one of the cleverest tricks of all, something called the dual credit system. Here's how it worked. Every car company in China had to hit two separate government targets. One target was about fuel efficiency for their gas cars. The other was about how many electric cars and plug-in hybrids they sold. If a company's lineup was mostly gas guzzlers, it would fall short, and the only way to fix that shortfall was to either build more electric cars or literally buy credits from a rival company that was making plenty of them, like BYD or Tesla. The required share started at around 10% in 2019 and climbed to 18% by 2023, with the bar set to rise even further every year after that. So imagine you ran a car company that mostly sold gas-powered trucks. You either had to scramble to launch new electric models fast or quietly write a check to BYD just for permission to keep selling the trucks you already had. In other words, this system wasn't just a reward for going electric. It was a financial punishment for staying with gas. It pushed huge international companies like Toyota, Volkswagen, and Ford to either rush expensive new EVs to market or pay their Chinese competitors just for the right to keep selling gas cars. And then there's maybe the strangest, most powerful policy of all. In big cities like Beijing and Shanghai, buying a car isn't enough. You also need a license plate, and the government has made those plates incredibly scarce on purpose to fight pollution and traffic. In Shanghai, people bid for a limited number of plates every single month. In one auction, 200,000 people competed for only 10,000 plates, and the average winning bid was around $14,000. That means your license plate alone could cost more than some of these cars. In Beijing, it's even tougher. Instead of an auction, there's a lottery, and the odds of winning have dropped below 1 in 500. Some families have been entering for nearly a decade without ever winning. But here's the loophole. If you buy an electric car instead of a gas car, you skip the whole lottery completely. You just walk into a dealership, buy an EV, and drive home with a plate the same day. For millions of families, that decision basically made itself. Why spend years gambling on a lottery and tens of thousands of dollars on a license plate when you could just buy an EV and start driving tomorrow? Honestly, this one policy alone may have pushed more people toward electric cars than any subsidy ever did. So here's the real question worth asking. Is China's EV boom mostly about brilliant engineering, or is it mostly about a government rigging the game in its own favor? The honest answer is probably a mix of both. But here's where it gets even more interesting. All of that government muscle works great inside China's borders. The second these cars try to cross into other countries, they slam straight into a wall that money and clever engineering can't easily knock down. Hitting a wall, why the world won't let them. Outside of China, Chinese electric cars are actually doing pretty well in a lot of places. In 2025 alone, China exported a record 2.5 million electric cars, more than double the year before. In Southeast Asia, Chinese brands now make up more than half of all electric car sales. In Europe, sales of BYD cars jumped nearly 170% in just the first few months of 2026 compared to the year before. Even Canada recently struck a trade deal that will let in tens of thousands more Chinese EVs over the next few years. But here's the catch. Once you take China itself out of the picture, Chinese brands still make up less than 10% of EV sales worldwide. And in the United States specifically, Chinese EVs have almost zero presence. As of 2026, you basically cannot legally buy a new Chinese-branded electric car anywhere in America. Why? The first reason is tariffs. A tariff is just a tax added onto something imported from another country. Normal tariffs on imported cars from places like Japan or Germany sit around 2.5%. But the United States slapped a special 100% tariff on Chinese EVs back in 2024. That means if a Chinese EV would normally cost $20,000, the tariff alone could add another $20,000 on top before you even add other fees. In plain terms, the tariff doubles the price overnight. The European Union took a similar, though less extreme, approach, adding extra taxes of up to roughly 35% on top of normal car tariffs after deciding that Chinese subsidies were giving these companies an unfair advantage. Even right next door, the picture is changing fast. In Mexico, Chinese electric cars have already grabbed around 15% of the market, simply because they're so much cheaper than the competition. That has American lawmakers nervous about Chinese cars sneaking across the border through a side door instead of the front door, which is part of why some of the newest proposed laws would block Chinese-branded vehicles from even driving across, even just for a single day. But tariffs aren't even the biggest wall. There's something even tougher to get around, and it has nothing to do with price. It's about trust. Modern cars are basically rolling computers. They have cameras, microphones, GPS trackers, and internet connections that are constantly online. All of that technology is gathering information, like where you drive, what's around you, and sometimes even audio or video recordings from inside the car. Under Chinese law, companies based in China are required to cooperate with their government if asked to share information. From the American government's point of view, That turns every connected Chinese car into a potential listening device on wheels, whether or not it's ever actually used that way. Because of that fear, the United States passed a rule that goes far beyond tariffs. Starting with cars made for the 2027 model year, any car sold in America cannot use connected software linked to China. By the 2030 model year, the same rule applies to hardware too, like cameras, chips, and sensors. And here's the part that catches a lot of people off guard. This rule doesn't just apply to cars built in China. It applies to any car with what regulators call a sufficient connection to China, even if the car is assembled somewhere else entirely. One electric car brand called Polestar got blocked from parts of the American market simply because a Chinese company partly owns it, even though most of its cars are sold and built in Europe. In 2026, American lawmakers introduced even tougher bills trying to ban Chinese vehicles completely, with massive fines of over $1.5 million for each violation. Even after President Trump met with China's leader in 2026, hoping to ease some trade tensions, dozens of lawmakers publicly warned him not to loosen the rules on Chinese cars, no matter what else got negotiated. That summit ended up focused mostly on things like soybeans and rare earth minerals, with almost no movement at all on car tariffs. China has also taken its case to the World Trade Organization, arguing that both the American and European tariffs are simply protectionism dressed up as national security. So far, neither side has backed down even a little. And here's a twist that makes the whole situation even stranger. China doesn't fully trust foreign connected cars either. Back in 2021, Chinese officials actually banned Tesla vehicles from military bases and certain government buildings, worried that the cameras built into Teslas could secretly record sensitive areas. So in a weird way, both countries are looking at each other's smart, connected cars and asking the exact same nervous question. What if this car is secretly spying on us? And here's the part that makes this whole story feel like poetic justice. While Chinese EVs get blocked from America, Tesla has been getting squeezed hard inside China, the exact market it once dominated. Back in 2022, Tesla controlled more than 75% of the American electric car market and was a major force in China too. By 2024, Tesla's share of the Chinese market had shrunk to around 6%, crowded out by BYD and a wave of local rivals. The company that once laughed off BYD as no real threat is now fighting just to hold its ground in the very country that built its biggest competitor. So even though Chinese EVs keep getting better, cheaper, and more advanced every single year, they are running straight into walls that have almost nothing to do with engineering. Tariffs make them too expensive. National security rules make them basically illegal, and no amount of clever battery swapping or rotating touchscreens can fix either one of those problems. So, who actually wins the race for the future? Step back for a second and look at the whole picture. China has the cheapest electric cars, the fastest production times, and now the highest global sales numbers of any country on Earth. Meanwhile, the United States is heading in almost the opposite direction. Federal tax credits that used to make EVs thousands of dollars cheaper for American buyers have already expired. Sales of electric cars in America have basically flatlined at under 10% of the market, while gas and hybrid vehicles are quietly making a comeback. There's also a bigger shift coming that could tip this whole race one way or another: self-driving cars. If fully self-driving robo-taxis really take off in the next few years, the country that can build electric cars, the fastest and cheapest, will have a massive head start, since robo-taxi fleets need huge numbers of cheap, reliable EVs to actually make money. China's sheer production scale could make it incredibly hard to catch up to once that race really gets going. Europe is sitting somewhere in the middle, trying to walk a tightrope between protecting its own car companies and still allowing enough competition to keep prices reasonable for regular families. And plenty of other countries, especially across Southeast Asia and Latin America, are simply welcoming cheap, well-made Chinese EVs with open arms, because for many families there, it's the most affordable way to own an electric car at all. Here's something worth thinking about too. Electric cars are often called zero emission, but that's only true at the tailpipe. Building the battery itself takes a massive amount of energy, mining metals, refining them, and putting them together in a factory. Then you still have to charge the car every night, and in China, about 60% of all electricity still comes from burning coal. Researchers estimate it takes around 73,000 miles of driving before an electric car actually breaks even on total emissions compared to a regular gas car. That doesn't mean EVs are a bad idea. It just means the full picture is more complicated than just zero emissions, no matter which country is making the cars. There's an even simpler irony hiding in all of this. China's license plate lottery was originally created to cut down on traffic jams and pollution by limiting how many cars hit the road. But once EVs were given a free pass around that lottery, more cars started showing up on the streets, not fewer. During major holidays, highways leaving cities like Beijing and Shanghai have gotten so packed that some drivers reported being stuck in place for over 24 hours straight. So even a policy built to fix one problem ended up creating a brand new one. What we're really watching play out isn't just a story about which company makes the best car. It's a story about which country gets to set the rules for the future of transportation. And whichever way it goes, there's one thing that almost nobody is talking enough about. Whether the world ends up driving Chinese EVs, American EVs, or sticks with gas engines completely, all of those choices are going to demand a massive amount of energy, electricity to charge batteries, oil to fuel engines, and power plants to keep it all running. The real question nobody seems to want to answer yet is simple. Where is all of that extra energy actually going to come from, and are we even ready to pay for it? If you made it this far, thanks for sticking around for the whole ride. If you found this interesting, give this video a like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, and tap the notification bell so you catch it the moment it drops. If you want to go even deeper, we've got another video breaking down exactly how China became the world's biggest battery maker, and it might explain even more about how this whole race started. Now I want to know what you think. Do you believe Chinese EVs will ever be allowed to sell freely in the United States, or is that wall never coming down? Drop your answer in the comments below.